Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar The Last Airbender. I'm Dan Doolan and I'm joined as always by the late airbender himself, Chris Billingham. Say hi, Chris, for the kids.
Just weighing myself. Way, it's me, Chrissy B.
I've noticed on the Discord occasionally people refer to that like noise you make, like the way, like it seems like that's a distinct Chrisism, way to sort of like indicate excitement for a thing. Apparently people have noticed you do that and it's not really a very common thing, so I think I'm going to dub that a Chrisism.
Oh, nice. So yeah, it has sort of like, it's been one of those naturally evolving, because I think I do it at the start quite a bit, so yeah, it's becoming a naturally evolving thing.
Yeah.
For the start, like the way some of the Kevin Smith live ones, they go hey ho. I don't think they ever talked about it. It just sort of happened.
Yeah. I think people, whenever you're excited about something, I think as well, what used to happen on Stephen University, I don't want to tell you like the next episode that was coming up, or that we were getting a big one, or that the show was coming back.
I think
you would always be like,
that noise is more that noise is more.
Yeah.
There's two. There's three, and then there's
yeah. Anyway,
and then if it's sexual, there's sorry. Just a deadpan. Oops.
Your the podcast version of your sexy voice. I pray for Jess that's a podcast version of it.
No. It's literally it's so at the beginning it's huh. And then at the beginning it's the oh, and then it's the wee, and then it's just sorry.
That's completing the arc.
Yeah, that's the arc.
That's the character arc of you getting some.
Yeah. Anyway,
let's move on to Avatar. So this week we watched.
Please.
This week we watched Bitter Work. Which is which is the I regret bringing it up. I feel like I've accidentally made a really nice thing we never referenced, a thing that we've now pointed out, and now it's going to become a thing, which is a bad thing. Bitter Work, which is the episode where Toph tries to teach Aang how to earthbend. For those who don't remember, Sokka gets stuck in the ground, and Aang's struggling to learn earthbending, and he can't get him out. And there's a moose. What is it? A saber-toothed moose tiger or something like that. Saber-toothed moose lion. And it's basically going to murder him, and Aang has to sort of hit it head on because he has been... earthbending is like the furthest from his natural approach to things, which is not to be head on about things, but to actually sort of like try to avoid pain, where avoid facing stuff, and sort of, which actually I think hits Aang's both personality and his fighting style. Airbending and the way he uses it is a lot of like dodging out of the way of the opponent's attacks and waiting for the moment to strike, but his personality as well, he dodged his responsibilities, when he was younger. So there's a lot of like links to like Aang's personality and his.
You've brought that up loads recently. Just forgive him and move on, Dan.
The show keeps connecting it. The show keeps, with its themes, keeps linking to Aang's sort of past trauma. What do you want me to do? So basically, in the end, he learns to face stuff head on, which is the way sort of earthbending, the sort of mentality of an earthbender would be, which is just there's no trick, there's no thing. You just you hit it with all the force you can and the confidence you can muster. And in the end, he does stand up to the moose lion, but of course they don't. Toph doesn't let him free Sokka because he might get crushed. Which is, I think, smart. The parallel story is Zuko, who has reached full emo. This is the Zuko emo phase. Lightning keeps blowing up in my face, just like everything else in my life. Zuko, where he's attempting to learn how to shoot lightning like Azula, but he fails to do so. So instead, Iroh teaches him a technique he learnt from the Water Tribe, which allows him to redirect lightning. And he wants to be tested on that. Iroh's like, are you crazy? I'm not going to shoot lightning at you. So then Zuko goes off into a storm to be hit by lightning because the universe hates him so much it might as well it's probably going to throw lightning at him at some point, and then it doesn't. Cue end of the episode. I love this episode. It's definitely flawed, I think, in places, because it's doing a lot. So some stuff is like slightly underserved, but I don't think anything is so majorly problematic that it affects the quality for me. This is a really strong entry. I mean, there's always going to be that element of bias because it's a Toph-heavy episode, and obviously Toph has been I've made it very clear at this point, Toph is my favorite character to just watch do anything. Like, if there was a show called Toph in lockdown and there was a pandemic in the world of Avatar, it was just Toph like washing the dishes, sitting on a sofa, I'd watch that show. Because, again, I just really enjoy the character. So there's an element of bias, but I'm very curious how you sort of felt about this one.
I'm very, like, I just keep thinking about, your use of the word emo, and I love the idea that season 3 is, like, Zuko forms a...
Zuko. You were so close.
Zuko forms like a band,
yeah,
and they release an album where all the song titles are really long and convoluted. So it's like, the lightning that strikes me reminds me of you, and just really really long.
When I try to do lightning, it blows up in my face, just like everything in my life.
Yeah.
No, it's parentheses, just like everything in my life.
My uncle loves tea, but I love the darkness. Just really long. Panic My Chem style titles. Early My Chem.
Oh, man, if somebody hasn't formed a Zuko emo band and started doing songs like that, I'm going to be very sad. that has to exist. If bands like Harry and the Potters exist, there must be a Zuko emo band out there.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Dear.
So I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I thought it was a really great episode. I thought the way that there was, I love a parallel, so the parallels of them both training were great.
Yes.
The way it all intertwined, I'm realizing when I hear the description, I realize how much of a moron I am, because one of my compliments was going to be, I really love the way that the Sokka plot and the Aang plot weaved together. It's like, fucking, of course it did. Like, Sokka's stuck in the ground and Aang's trying to move Earth.
Yeah.
Like, of course they're going to merge those two.
Yeah.
But I thought, the way it all... But yeah, the way it all came together was really nice. I think we've had, especially last episode, when the complaint was, or the nitpick rather was, it just felt like it rushed certain elements of it.
Right.
This felt, the pacing of this felt lovely, and it was just really, like, it's one of those things where there's not too much to say about it other than it's cool when they did the history and really talked about the differences between the elements and the benders within those elements.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought that was great. I thought that was really interesting stuff. Sort of a history lesson of the world was really cool. I do literally more fitting than last week. I think when we talked about Nitpick Corner, I do have a proper like tiny nitpick for Nitpick Corner.
Oh yeah, let's get straight to it. I love a Nitpick Corner. Yeah, I feel like Nitpick Corner needs a theme tune. Yeah, I used to do like dance quote of the week for Fringe Observers. For those who don't remember or didn't listen to that podcast, whenever I did a quote of the week, Chris insisted on doing a little jingle. Which usually was some sort of weird beat poem followed by dance quote of the week. So I feel like we need some sort of like a nitpick corner, like just something to go like into it.
Yeah. We'll
workshop
Triv it up. And then also, because it's always in my... Because Andy from The Office, when he's doing that, give me the big boys and free 'em a little song. Because that's always in my head. I will occasionally go, give me the Triv boy. Be my Trivy... Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, give me the nitpicks. I don't know. Nitpick corner. Whee. No. What it should be is, because we don't want to do it every week, but what it should be is, hey, Dan, let's take a visit to Nitpick Corner.
Right, but I need it's the call and response. So it's hey Dan, hey Chris.
Yeah, no, but it should be a question every week. So it should be like this. So this will be this week's, right? Hey Dan,
hey Chris,
have you got your walking boots on?
I have now,
because we're going to take a visit to Nitpick Corner.
I love it.
So basically, my nitpick is this, and it truly is a nitpick. I don't think the joke at the end, there's a joke where Sokka starts giving a dramatic speech and he goes, while I was alone, trapped in the earth, I started to really think about things. And then Aang goes, hey, Katara, look what I can do. And everyone's attention is distracted from Aang and goes to that. Now, I've got a whole list of reasons why I didn't like that. One, it seems really cruel. He's trying to say something serious, and everyone literally just ignores him. And we never even cut back to him to see his reaction. And later on, he laughs at, I can't remember what, but he laughs at something else, suggesting he just immediately gets over it, so it's weird. Two, doesn't actually reflect his experience in that, when he was trapped in that hole. He spent the entire time talking to that animal, and like there was never any sign that he was alone with his thoughts. So whilst I appreciate that
I would slightly disagree with that part, because doesn't he, when he's talking to that animal, sort of talk about how he wants to be more karmically neutral, and like he's, you know, he feels like the universe is punishing him for his meat eating, so he's going to give up meat eating, and when that doesn't work, he's like, look, I'm going to give up my whole identity to get out of this hole. I'm going to be the straight talking veggie guy. I won't use sarcasm anymore. Do you not think that's Sokka, admittedly in a very Sokka comedic, talking to a baby moose lion cub or whatever it is?
I think it's, which is my third point, I think it's the tonal difference. It's so tonally different to what he then is saying.
Right, okay, yeah, that's fair.
Like, it just jarred with me. And it just seems really, like, mean. And it's never referred back to. And I didn't find it that funny.
No, it's so quick, and it doesn't really add a lot. And it raises more questions than it answers. So I guess you're right. Like, as nitpick corner goes, it's like 10 seconds of the episode you could literally just cut. You would never know the difference, and the episode it would just all play a lot better in general. It's like an attempt at a quick joke that actually, like I said, raises more questions than it answers, and causes actually some weird retroactive like weirdness with the episode and that scene itself. You sort of go like, yeah, it's weird that they then don't do anything with that. It's just like a throwaway line. Like, it seems really...
Yeah, I think that's my issue. So, but other than that, really, really enjoyed the episode. I loved Iroh, the notion of Iroh. It so fits his character that he would see the value in and take learnings from all the... benders. Like, I thought that was fantastic. I thought that was really fitting and really nice. I don't like that they have another thing and we've parted again, have we? Those two, they've split up again, despite, you know, him nearly dying.
I don't think necessarily. It didn't. I can't remember like exactly where they are when we next see them, if I'm being honest. I genuinely don't remember whether they're together or not next time we see them. But I read it as that, you know, he was going off to try and get hit by lightning, but when the storm passed, he was, you know, whether it worked or not, he was just going to wander back to wherever they were hanging out.
Who's he yelling at as well at the end?
The universe.
Yelling at God? Has he found... Right, so the universe, okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's saying, like, you know, you keep kicking me, like, you know, now I want you to kick me, like, throw the lightning at me. You've thrown everything else at me, throw some lightning at me, universe, and then it doesn't, and it's like, oh great, so now you're kicking me, but in the opposite way. Like, it's even now when I want you to kick me, you won't kick me. Like, that's how cruel that's how mistreated I am with my luck. You know, I'm almost tying a little bit back to Sokka's whole karma thing. Slightly, it's a bit of it's just a strained link that, but it's, you know, it's a similar idea, which is just like, right now he feels like the sort of cosmic universe on a wider scale is screwing him over, because so much of what's gone wrong for Zuko wasn't in his control. Some of it was, obviously. I mean, the biggest thing that caused him to start on this path was obviously speaking out of turn at that meeting, and that was very much a choice he made. But so. A lot of what's gone wrong since has not been in his hands. You know, it's a lot of it's been choices other characters have made around him, you know. So I can see why he would very much feel like the universe was kicking him in the teeth time and time again.
I would have liked to have seen the extended version of that scene where he
pulls out his guitar.
Yeah, he turns around and he just goes, "When I was a young boy, my father." Yeah,
God damn it. Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, he's such an interesting character, because he's so complicated, but he's also, I tell you what's the difference here. That was something that's been interesting. I've been watching recently and reviewing on our channel Infinity Train Book 4, and what I sort of liked about Book 4 of Infinity Train was the characters were not actually as easy to track in terms of their emotional character arcs across the season, because they were so complicated. what they were going through was a really complicated series of almost contradictory thoughts and feelings. And it made it a little bit harder to track, but I found that quite satisfying in its own way. If it was being marked by a screenwriting instructor at a college, it would be marked down for not having an easily trackable character arc. Right? But, it functioned for me. I really enjoyed that element of it because it was a bit more challenging, right? So I was on board. Zuko is both. You can always track where Zuko is, but he has a lot of very conflicted feelings and ideas inside of him. You see Zuko struggling. His desire to be back with the Fire Nation is completely at odds with some of the choices he makes to not hurt others. So like in the Zuko Alone episode, the choices he made to protect earthbending families, both the pregnant lady and the family he ends meeting, is very much at odds with this idea of I will catch the Avatar, I will return to my throne. Like that. Those two things don't work at all. But yet you never aren't tracking where he is at any given point. Because, I don't know, just great writing, I guess. Like, it's always really clear where he's at any given moment. Yet it is an equally... So then I look back at Infinity Train and go, man, maybe they could have made it track better and still had the complexity. I don't know. Maybe I'm retrospectively reanalyzing that. I don't know. It'll be interesting because you're getting through Infinity Train. It'll be interesting to get your thoughts on that when we get there. But yeah, it's really clever what they do with Zuko. It should be difficult to follow because of so many contradictory feelings, but you always know where he's at any given moment, and that's really impressive writing. And I don't know if that's just Iroh balancing him out or what. I don't know.
He's got a hell of a lot of depth, a hell of a lot, and I think the writing of that character is in a way one of the most impressive elements of the show.
Yeah, I think so. He is a fan favorite, and I think for a very good reason.
Especially when, take a shot. In all seriousness, it can be so hard to get emo right. This is where you have to take the shot. I have never had a problem with Harry in Order of the Phoenix, but I know a lot of people, and a common complaint is, especially, and I'm just talking about the books here. I'm not talking about the films. A common complaint is that Harry's too emo and emotional in Order of the Phoenix, and it just shows you how hard it actually is to get that right and get that done well
and make that work for everyone. Because I agree with you. I like that in that book because it gives him a complexity and a new dimension we haven't seen in him. He's angry about his situation for the first time ever, rather than being passive about it. And he should be angry. He's been mistreated a lot of his life, right? So it's good to see him finally clap back a little bit, for me. But I understand a lot of fans don't like it. And I know that it's one of the least popular elements of that book. And I actually think that book is a little bit underrated in the Harry Potter pantheon. I think it's one of the better ones, to be honest with you. Helped by having a villain throughout instead of a surprise villain appearance at the end. An antagonist throughout the entire book is better than an antagonist only appearing through a mystery surprise reveal at the end. Anyway,
Harry from Order of the Phoenix is actually one of the contributing members and writers of in Zuko's emo band. He wrote the song "I Kissed Her Under the Mistletoe and All She Did Was Cry." One of my favourite tracks.
What I love is, as I was finishing my point, you sort of tried to interject a couple of times, and I just love the idea that you'd come up with that joke and were just desperate to say it.
It really was. Because you know what it is? Because at the very least, because I think I in the past have formed an emo band with a really long song title joke, and whoever I've been talking to just hasn't fucking understood it. But I feel like this audience and you will, and I'm getting such a kick out of coming up with them. But yeah,
keep doing it. I'm very much enjoying them, so I'm happy for you to keep doing it. But yeah, I think.
And I kissed her under the mistletoe, and all she did was cry. Is a great title for an emo song.
That's exactly right. So looking at that comparison, I think you're exactly right. It would be easy for them to get it wrong and make Zuko a less popular character as a result of it. The same way that attempting to do that with Harry ended up making him making people regularly complain about how Harry behaves in that book. a lot of caps lock in that book. I always notice that when I reread it. I was just like, there's a lot of caps lock. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of Harry yelling and Fred and George being like, "Huh?"
Yeah.
Do you think? I think they do a really good job as well, and I don't even think it's deliberate. I think it's just maybe it is, and it's just like great writing. But they kind of, it's really clever because you could go. They have to really reinforce. No. The Avatar is like naturally good at all four elements. It needs to be brought out by a master, but they do have these skills in their past and can draw on them because they do without having to reiterate that in the dialogue between Aang, Toph, etc. Because it just wouldn't necessarily be said. You know that it's hard to make that work naturally. Having Iroh have that conversation with Zuko and having Zuko say, "Is that right?"
Yeah, I was about to start clapping. Woo!
Having Zuko,
Wait.
having Zuko say, "This sounds more like Avatar stuff," or whatever the line is. Like, it's a really good way of just going to the audience. Look, he's gonna get this fairly quickly, and we're gonna try and point out that he's still fundamentally training for water bending as well, but it's gonna seem a bit quick. But you have Iroh kind of go, well, no, that's the Avatar. He is the circle that joins all four of these things together.
Exactly. And what I think is really neat as well is it's actually even slightly more nuanced than it comes across in this episode, because in this episode, Katara sort of says, earthbending is your natural opposite. If water and fire are natural opposites, air and earth are natural opposites. And when you draw that circle, if you put air at the top, the next one in the Avatar cycle, in the sort of 3 o'clock position, is water. And then earth at the bottom, directly opposite from it. And then round the next side is fire before you come back round to air. So air is literally the opposite side of the circle to earth, and fire is opposite side of the circle to water. So that all tracks, but it's actually even cleverer than that, I think. And this is a slight teaser for something they talk about in a later Avatar thing that we'll come to. Is they basically hint that it's actually not as simple as the natural element of the nation you were born into, but it's actually a little bit more related to your personality, personally, and the trend tends to be that it's the element natural opposite because you were brought up in the culture, so your personality matches the culture of that. So Aang, brought up by monks, naturally has the personality type that goes with that because you grow up in a culture that shapes your personality. So Earth is his toughest one. But there's nothing to preclude an Avatar being born and not living within or not growing up 100% in the nation they were from and having a different element to their opposite be the one they struggle with, because it's actually more about the one that's most different to your personality. It just tends to be your elemental opposite because you grow up in that culture. And that's both really smart, makes total sense, and it allows them to do different things with any other, if they want to tell any stories from past avatars, any stories from future avatars. It doesn't have to be, they're going to really struggle with this element. We know that because it's this very didactic diagram that tells you exactly what they are going to... We've introduced it that way through Aang, because Aang grew up in a very traditional way. He grew up with the nation he was from and has now gone out to do that. But not every avatar has a traditional avatar learning situation. I mean, Aang's isn't really that traditional. He skipped 100 years and his whole nation are gone. But in terms of how he's gone out, he's hit a certain age, he's gone out to learn all the elements. That is quite traditionally Avatar. He's done it earlier. They usually don't do that till they're about 16 in a more traditional environment. But that again, it's a system that allows for a bit of mixing it up, because by putting that element of personality into it, you don't have to tell that if you go to tell a previous story or a subsequent story, you're not locked into they have to struggle with this element if you don't want to. Yeah. So that's a very long way around of me saying I'm very complimentary of the way they've developed this mythology.
Yeah, no, and it really, what I loved is like a lesser show. If you have mythology being explained, season 2, episode 6 or 7, whatever this is, you kind of, you'd be able to find instances where it didn't track. All of that tracked. When Iroh's explaining it, You know, whether it's about that, whether it's about the opposites and why they'd be difficult, or whether it's just the overview of, you know, what the Benders' characters are like. Even, you know, Toph's training of, you suddenly go, when she talks about the stance, you go, oh shit, yeah, every time we've seen Earthbenders, they've been doing that. Like, it's stunning. Like, it all tracks. Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah, I mean, that's I mentioned him before. That's all a result of the guy they brought in to do. There was I forgot his name. That's such a shame. They brought in a martial artist and they filmed him and then animated based on the movements he had in his film. They'd go through the film of him moving frame by frame and mimic his movements, and he basically developed the 4 movement styles of the nations and the bending techniques, and based them on real martial arts from our world. But like, each nation has a specific martial arts style associated with it, and there are obviously there are Earthbenders that will use variants of it. You know, it's never the same exactly, because as we said in the past, like Azula has a slightly different technique to every other Firebender because she's not she's moved a bit beyond the basic forms or whatever, and you know, there's always that personal flair you can add to it, but the very basics of all of their movements are coordinated. And again, that consistency just shows how much they had this all planned out before they even put pen to paper for the first episode. You know, they knew completely. This stuff because it tracks right back to episode 1. Aang's airbending in episode 1 is still using similar movements to what he's using now. They haven't changed that, and that's genius. And the lore as well all tracks backwards as well. You know, knowing Aang's history, it fits with everything we've learned in this episode about the different, you know, the way the bending works. And again, and even looking at Iroh and thinking, actually, the Fire Nation are kind of lucky that if they want to keep pursuing conquest, they're lucky that Ozai took over, not Iroh, because Iroh seems very like following the death of his son, like he really did, and maybe even before then. It's hard to, you know, at this point it's hard to know. We don't know much about pre Ba Sing Se Iroh, but certainly by now he's clearly become very cultured. He knows a lot about the spirit world. We learned that at the end of season 1, and he knows a lot about he understands. He's very wise. He understands learning from other cultures is really important. And you've got to ask yourself, if Iroh had become the Fire Lord, not Ozai, would they still be pursuing this conquest, or would he be respecting the other cultures and pulling back?
That's a great point. I think he'd be respecting the other cultures and pulling back.
Yeah, I think so too. I absolutely think so too. And I think that's actually a little bit why Ozai made such an effort to push out his brother. Because if he'd have thought Iroh would have been pursuing things, I don't think he would have necessarily felt the need to do that. He would have been quite happy to be a general himself, you know, go out and seize power manually. Like, I think I don't feel like Ozai would have been shy about that, but I feel like he saw weakness in Iroh, what he perceives as weakness in Iroh, and that's all present here. Seeing Iroh look at all this culture again, even that tracks back to things we already know about Iroh. And also, I will say, the little flashback we have in this episode, it's like only like 10 seconds long, of Iroh playing with his son when they were young. That breaks me every time.
Yeah, I thought that was really emotional. At first, I was like, because that is
who are these people?
Kind of an example. Well, it's kind of an example of the opposite of what I was talking about earlier. Something we haven't seen throughout, but then we've not really been in his subconscious throughout, like we were at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah. Were you okay with that as a solution to the potential cliffhanger of, is Iroh okay? Just that he's been wounded, but he's recovered and he's with Zuko. Was that fine? Were you okay with that? Because I don't mind, but I could see some people being like, shouldn't that have been more of a struggle? Not that just he wakes up the next episode and he's okay.
Yeah, I think it's fine because the rest of the episode is so good. Right. And we get right into it through that. And also, Zuko sends everyone else away. So he must be fairly confident he can bring him back.
Right, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
If anyone's heard me typing, I've only come up with 2. Maybe best to do them now. Can I come up with any other titles? I've only got two. The first is the best way to travel is sitting on a giant bird, which I really like because it applies to both of them. Because obviously in that book they travel via buckbeak, I think, and Zuko's got his big bird. The one that I'm really proud of is Dad gave my sister a mission when all he gave me was this scar, which I think is really. And the problem is, I came up with that one first, and I haven't come up with anything that stopped it.
The only one I come up with is my uncle hates my tea, but I really like the gross taste.
Nice. What are your other sort of headline thoughts?
Yeah. So I mean, I do love that. Speaking of the tea, I do love him trying to make Iroh tea.
Yeah, it was very sweet.
And Iroh being like, "Oh, it's bracing" or whatever. They're just like subtly. I love that it's a very subtle animation thing. Zuko slightly turns his head, and Iroh very quickly chucks the tea out the window. I don't know if you noticed that. I think I missed that on the first viewing, but it's quite good. I do think the other moment that I always note, because it's just such a funny moment, but also just shows you that Iroh, as soft as he can be and as understanding as he can be, he still has a line, and evidently Azula's crossed it when Zuko says,
"Oh yeah,"
when Zuko says, "I know, she's my sister and I should be getting along," and Iroh's like, "No, she's crazy. She needs to go down." Which is
just to be taken down or something. This episode had a lot of comedy, like a lot of the stuff with Sokka and the creature was amazing.
Yeah.
Like I swear I'll be a vegetarian, and all of that stuff.
Even before he
really
gets stuck,
good.
when he's talking to it, when he's hunting it, and he's like, "You are very cute, but unfortunately, you're made of meat," which is just a great line.
And when he just really softly goes, "Come back, Boomerang."
Boomerang, now come back. Just dead.
Do you think
like,
on the flip side of that, just because I know we're doing headlines, but I feel like I'm conscious we're only half an hour in, and I've spent a lot of it giving song titles. Do you think Toph comes across well? Of course you don't. You're fucking Toph's #1 fan. But do you think there's any possibility that Toph just comes across as a bit too brutal in her training, or do you think because they so clearly set it up as the juxtaposition of Katara's approach, it works?
Yeah, I mean, with danger of sounding like Toph #1 fan with a little flag with Toph's face on it and a T-shirt with #1 fan written on it or something. I do think the way they do it is pretty clever, because they make it clear that from minute one she's been wise enough to identify Aang's to not head on, and they almost make it seem like she's just intentionally being mean to get him to the point, because it's not just him standing up to the moose at the end, the moose line, saber-toothed moose line, whatever it is, at the end. She says, and even more impressively, you stood up to me. It's like the whole episode, she's intentionally bullying him to get him to a place where he's going to stand up for himself. So by the end of the episode, they make it seem like it was part of a wider plan for Toph and not happenstance. Yeah. She was manipulating Aang. Is that a nice thing to do? No. Did it work? Yeah, it did.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fair. Yeah, and I love they're really playing her and Katara's relationship well. And I liked I thought it was really sweet at the end when she said, you did the positive reinforcement thing, didn't you? And she's like, yeah, and it really worked.
Yeah.
Like, that's almost like seemingly the first moment of friendship between them, and it makes a lot of sense that their common ground and unifying thing is Aang.
Yeah. And speaking of Katara, one of the moments I wrote down as well is I really like that they play it as a joke at first. He refers to Toph as Sifu Toph because he's met her as a master, whereas Katara, he kind of got to know her before she was his master. So she was his friend first, right? That's the difference. So then he gets into this situation where he's, had this moment where he's at his lowest because Toph was beating him down again on purpose, and he's doing a little bit of water training with Katara, and she's doing the whole positive reinforcement thing. And he, after that sweet conversation, he says Sifu Katara, and that both helps the Katara Toph relationship move along. Like, it's a little arc for this episode, which is it starts with Katara being upset he's not calling her Sifu, and it ends with them sort of finding common ground, but really it's sort of Toph like giving Katara a win because she's being nice to Katara, which I think is sweet as well. But it also gives us a little arc for Katara and Aang in this episode, that she almost earns his respect just by giving him good advice, like, and to the point where he calls her Sifu Katara. And I just, again, the way this episode works, it's doing so many things. It is kind of magic. I don't know how it fits in so much great comedy, so much great lore, and all these great character moments, while being a cohesive narrative of its own.
Yeah, completely.
It's doing
agree.
a lot.
Yeah, it really is great, and it's such a nice. It's just it's kind of nice that the majority, obviously at the end, with the attack, it gets more. But I just really liked that it wasn't someone's after them or they've got to get from A to B, because we rarely, for a show which we have to assume the things we aren't seeing is the training and the discussion and the learning. So, but that has to be going on, off camera, to believe that Aang will master these skills, etc. So to see a bit of that is really cool. Even just having the excuse to see where he is now with waterbending and see what his training for that looks like now. The bit where she water bends the wreath or whatever it is to attack him. Like, great moment.
Yeah.
What were your other thoughts before?
Just a couple of very quick moments I want to highlight as just things I liked. I enjoyed the little fun Aang not being good at earthbending montage. That was just lovely. I just thought it was a series of like funny visual gags. I'm on board with that. I really like, at risk of this potentially becoming bigger, so I'll try to keep this quick, but I really like lightning being described as a pure expression. No, sorry. Yeah, lightning is a pure expression of firebending that is not fueled by rage or anger. That's super clever, because you would imagine the easy route for a kid's show to go would be to say, well, lightning is fueled by anger and rage, because obviously it's Azula, the big bad villain, that does it. She's so scary she can do lightning because she's so angry and full of rage. But actually, it's firebending in general is rage. And actually, it's Azula's cold-heartedness, her sheer lack of emotion, that makes lightning come so naturally to her. And that
says so much
way
about
scarier.
Her character. Says so much about her character and how she, grew up and was raised, and her relationship with, everyone, not just her family. And again, so in keeping with what we already know about the character.
Incredible. It's such a great moment. And again, it would have been so easy to go lazy and say, normal firebenders are blah blah, but then if you're really full of anger and rage seriously, you can create lightning. Like, it would have been so easy to do that because you associate anger and rage with the bad guys, like naturally. It's almost like a shortcut to making the bad guy seem like a bad guy, but instead actually it's her lack of emotion. That's so much more interesting and so much more complex.
Great.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Other quick little things. I really liked the boulder attempt when they try to throw the boulder at Aang to make him earthbend, and Katara interjects with, is this really the best idea? She's like, you're right, Katara. Thank you for that advice. And then she blindfolds Aang to make it more complicated. And she's like, thanks, Katara. And Aang's like, yeah, thanks, Katara.
Yeah, that was great.
It's a great moment. And then the final one, I just want to read a quote. And this quote is exactly why I love Toph. If you're not tough enough to stop the rock, then you could at least give it the pleasure of smooshing you instead of jumping out of the way like a jelly-boned wimp. That is an incredible piece of dialogue.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. Shall we get to the Triv then, Chris?
Triv it up!
Triv it up. So, this is the first time... Oh, I just want to make a note. The Triv this week was absolutely shocking. Like, this is... I'm going to read some of it, and you'll go, that isn't Triv. That's just what happens in the episode. I know. This is the first time Aang earthbends outside of the Avatar state. I know. When Toph was using Aang's staff as a nutcracker to get him to fight back, Aang claimed it was a delicate instrument and an antique handcrafted device by the monks, but despite this, Aang has actually been seen using the staff for much more demanding tasks in the past, such as when he used it to break a metal chain he'd frozen in ice. That is 100% true. I also thought that.
Yeah, I view that more as it's my property, do as I say, not do as I do.
Right, exactly. Yeah, 100% agree. This is for some reason they've put this in the trivia, and I love this as the trivia. This is the third episode in which Zuko cries.
Jesus.
That's in the trivia. When talking about airbenders, Iroh says, also apparently they had a pretty good sense of humour. This is actually exemplified in past episodes of the show. Monk Gyatso was seen pulling pranks twice. First, in the Southern Air Temple, when him and Aang shoot cakes at the meditating air nomads. And in the second time, it was in the Storm, when we showed Gyatso, who was playing like a chess-like game with Aang. And he used airbending to put Aang's hood over his eyes and then swapped the pieces around. It was Pai Sho. It was Pai Sho they were playing, which is obviously the game that we know that Iroh plays. So there you go. So that's a little hint in this episode that actually has been backed up by historical information.
Maybe they played it together.
Maybe. Because also, actually, it's a really interesting point because... Well, I don't know how old Iroh would be because that was 100 years ago.
Iroh's not 100 years old, is he? Yeah, never mind.
Probably not. But I do like the idea that Iroh, he's got quite a good sense of humour. There's a chance maybe he did interact with some monks at some point, and that's where he sort of got that from. Yeah. Again, leaning into this idea of he learned from many of the nations,
Yeah.
The title, Bitter Work, refers to both Aang training with the earthbending and Zuko training with lightning. I know. Thanks, trivia. The team's Sifu, used by Aang to greet Toph and later Katara, is a Cantonese word that means teacher or master. And then finally, final piece of trivia, they estimate there are 3.8 billion bricks in the Great Wall of China. The precise number, though, remains unknown due to the different size and shapes of the bricks used in its construction. So there you go.
It really upsets me that I'm reacting exactly the way you want me to react to it.
To what?
That's what upsets me the most.
What are you talking about?
And it's the fact that I keep forgetting, and then every time you start, I go, "Oh, fucking hell!"
What are you referring to?
That's yeah. Cool, good. I'm glad.
There's trivia. I don't understand, Chris. You seem angry, and I don't really understand why. I'm a little lost.
It's just we got a listener's question.
We have got a listener question, and it comes from our good friend Will on the Patreon.
Will!
Who asked us a really good question. And a question so good, I was just like, where do you start with this? But we'll give it a go. If you were only allowed to do one podcast, which would you do?
What, of the ones we do?
Yeah.
Right.
So I went, well, nothing but static. It's the main one. We've done it since 2012. We're nearly 10 years in. We'd have to keep that. But then I went, yeah, but no one listens to that. It's arguably our least popular podcast, which is madness. Both Avatar, Steven University, and Fringe Observers outstrip it regularly. So then I go like, well, yeah, obviously Steven University is sort of on a weird little hiatus. Like, we'll come back and do occasional episodes of that now. That's the plan. But and then of course Rewind Reviews, which admittedly has the same problem as Nothing But Static in that no one really listens to it. But I have such fun doing it. So I don't know. Do I just go for the one I enjoy doing the most and we stick with Rewind Reviews, or do I go with what people like to listen to that I also like? Do I find a balance? So something like this that has quite good listenership, but I also really enjoy doing. Or do I go something that's really fun to do but no one hears? I don't know.
Yeah, for me, I think next year we've been doing this for 10 years. I think if we were going to make a decision based on time we put in versus listeners we get, we'd have stopped. So I wouldn't make it on that decision on that basis.
You're right, because we've been doing Nothing But Static for nearly 10 years and we've yet to stop. So
yeah,
in the face of overwhelming,
yeah, exactly. In the face of overwhelming non-reactions, we kept going. I think, but you know what? There's also there's a logistical thing. I would choose Nothing But Static. Because I think it's the most. If we're only doing one, it's the most variety. It's often amongst the most fun to do, but more importantly than that, I think we can't fit in something akin to any of the other podcasts in any of the other podcasts. We can't randomly review Avatar in Rewind Reviews, and we can't randomly talk about an old movie. Whereas elements of the things we enjoy in those other podcasts we could slip into Nothing But Static more than any of the others. So we could talk about, not episode by episode, I appreciate that, but that's part of the challenge of the question. But I think you go with the all-rounder, you go with the thing you really enjoy. I mean, I'm glad we don't have to do this, because I wouldn't want to. I enjoy the balance. I enjoy drilling into something as closely as an episode a week. And I enjoy the bizarreness of, having a reason to talk about Dr. Dolittle, which wouldn't easily come up on Nothing But Static. But right. I think there are more excuses to scratch those itches in Nothing But Static if we had to truly choose one.
Right.
And Nothing But Static is the backbone of everything we do. I think it's the foundation. It would be weird to not have that foundation.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's the conclusion I came to, because you're exactly right. Like, you can see elements of these podcasts in early Nothing But Statics as well. Like for example, we don't do them anymore, and the reason we don't do them anymore is because we do this. But we used to do show retrospectives where we'd break down a whole show across its run in a podcast, where we'd go season by season. That's, I think, a really early us scratching the itch to talk about a show very specifically. We're trying to get as granular as we can in the format that Nothing But Static allows. Obviously we can't do episode by episode because we don't have the time on Nothing But Static, but we were clearly itching to do that back then, and notice those episodes, those retrospectives we were doing, we stopped doing those once we started doing Fringe Observer, Steven University, and Analysing Avatar. So I feel like you're right. Like the place we could probably scratch those itches the best is NBS.
Have you started watching the show we were thinking of doing an episode on?
Not yet, but actually probably the next week or two. I think there's we've got after the next week or two, we've got a couple of weeks of quite intense podcasting, and then we've got a break. And I was actually thinking of using that break to get cracking. Have you been watching that show?
No, not yet. But similar to you, I was like, well, maybe in the break we can watch a bit.
Yeah,
but excited. That one would be season by season, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we were talking about doing that season by season, which is like an even further evolution of our old retrospective episodes. But yeah,
to be fair, we probably can't take up to 6 episodes of Nothing But Static with it, could we? Oh, but maybe, because it would be over the course of like 2 years, wouldn't it? So yeah, I think it's 100%. Fine.
Yeah, and we're always like, and I must admit, with Nothing But Static, like there'll be times when there aren't many great new TV shows because we used to just review everything, so we never had nothing to review because we just picked whatever new show came out that week, whether we wanted to watch it or not. Whereas I feel like we're more selective now, which is what's given us the room to do things like forced reviews and shows we've missed, because there'll be weeks where there are new shows, but there's no new show we want to watch. So we'll just do something different. Anyway, so to answer Will's question, I think the podcast we'd keep doing probably is Nothing But Static, which is sadly, the boring answer, but it is the practical answer. I think if we were just going on what do you have the most fun recording, I've got to admit, Rewind Reviews is such a blast. But this has been this. Yeah, and I don't mean to say last year it wasn't, but I think every episode of this second series of Avatar has also been a blast. Agreed. Yeah, we've had a lot of fun reviewing these. I think we've just got a bit more comfortable reviewing. I think we were caught out with the first season of Avatar with how straightforward it almost is. We'd reviewed shows with big overarching mysteries, lot to speculate on, lot to, that sort of stuff. I think we weren't prepared to review a show as sort of straightforward as this initially, and I think it caused off guard. So I think the first few episodes of this are a little bit more stilted, and we've become more comfortable. And then taking the break and doing some rewind reviews and coming back to it actually ended up being kind of perfect, because we cleared the slate of that and came into this series knowing what the show is a bit better in terms of how we review it. And that's led to us being a bit more relaxed this series of Analysing Avatar. So it's almost a bit of a shame, because I feel like some people might stumble across this podcast, listen to the first few episodes, and be like, it's okay, but like it's just two guys analysing the show. Whereas I feel like we've gotten comfortable enough to tangent more, like be a bit more lighthearted about it, but also like still get analysis of the show, which I think makes the podcast a lot more entertaining maybe to listen to. But it's too little too late. Second season, you listen to 20 hours of bullshit first.
But going back to the original question, no other if we were only doing one and had to choose, again, the ideal is not to have to choose, but that is the question. Nothing but static would be less affected by not doing the others, whereas Analysing Avatar would suddenly contain a 20-minute tangent about Line of Duty's finale. Do you know what I mean?
Because we want to talk about it. Yeah, I agree.
Because we want to talk about it. Yeah.
So anyway, if you'd like to ask us a question, as Will did, you're welcome to do so. You'll get a little shout out on the podcast, and obviously we'll answer your question for a couple minutes on the show. Sometimes we'll spend too many minutes on your question, so you might be one of those weeks. But you can do it at the Patreon, which is patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, where you can give us as little as $1 a month to get access. There are tiers, but that's just if you want to be more generous and help us out paying the server bills and stuff for the various hostings, because we use there are a few free hosting options, but for our podcasts, particularly like Nothing But Static, Analysing Avatar, for stability, we've gone with a company that actually charges for hosting, just so that we can rely on it a bit better, because free services tend to come and go because it tends to not be a very sustainable model. So yeah, we have outgoings, and it's nice to be breaking even on this podcast. And we're not quite at breaking even yet, but we've been really close for a long time. So if you want to help us out, go to the patreon.com /nothingbutstatic. Give us as little as $1 a month. There are two major perks. Episodes of Rewind Reviews and Analysing Avatar go out a week early on that platform, with other occasional bonus podcasts. There's one we do need to record soon, which is the second episode of Nothing But Claps, which is a clap-based interview podcast, which is as mad as it sounds. The first episode of that is already available if you're on Patreon and you want to dig that out and discover the madness that is. That was a really fun one to do as well.
That was wicked. I've just sorry to interject. I've just lifted my headphones and discovered that I think a neighbour is playing music really loudly. I don't think you can hear it, but if you can, I apologise.
Yeah, it's weird. These microphones are like very sensitive, but only I find in like a weird, like they have to be, they're quite directional. So unless the sound is being sort of pumped straight at them, they tend not to pick it up. But if it has been picked up,
yes, I think it's fine. But we always end up over egging it and apologising because of the headphones we use, we can only hear each other. So suddenly, like I say, you lift a headphone and you're like, oh shit, there's an external noise I just didn't hear. So I think it is fine, but just apologies.
Yeah. Other ways you can get us or support us if you don't want to go to go through the Patreon for the ability to ask us a question or get an episode a week early. You can always give us a like or a subscription or a thumbs up or a heart on any of the platforms that we put these podcasts out on. So if you're on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel or like some of the videos. That always helps. Or comment if you've got something you've got some thoughts on these episodes. You don't have to just sort of yell them into the ether. You can send them straight to us. We're available through Twitter as well. I'm at Dan Doolan. Chris is at C Billingham. Obviously, YouTube comments section is another good place to do it. You can also send things to mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk, and that will get to us. We don't always reply, sadly. We do get a lot of emails, and I say a lot. We get more emails than I have the time to reply to, certainly at the moment. So we don't always have the time to reply to your email, and then once a week has gone by, even if I then have the time, I always feel bad about getting back to people that late. I do try. You can get to us in all those ways. I think that's everything. Oh no, of course, Rapho. Yeah, we'll give us a Rapho shout out, of course. So Rapho did the piece of art that's the central piece of art for this podcast, which is the appa in front of the sunset with the gang on top, which, by the way, I can now admit, Chris, that has a slight spoiler in it, and I've hidden it from you this whole time. Toph is in that fucking picture.
Oh, is she? I've never even noticed that.
No, I know. And I was like, shh. I just never brought it up. I just didn't want you to count the number of heads, because it's not just Aang, Katara, and Sokka in that thing.
Has anyone pointed it out to you?
No. Well, someone did mention it right up top when we first launched that Toph's in it, and does Chris know? And I was like, I've said nothing. So, so Toph's in the image. But it's a beautiful piece of artwork, and if you want to go support Rapho, who drew that, you can do. It's Instagram.com/Raphodraws, where you can get access to a lot of their imagery, but also they have like a Redbubble account and a Twitter and a YouTube, which you can get to by going to launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws, which takes you to sort of like a page that has all of the various places you can get Rapho and support Rapho. The Redbubble account, I think you can get like t-shirts with the designs on. Rapho's an amazing artist, and you should definitely go support.
Absolutely.
She's great. So, that's everything for this week. Thanks so much for listening, guys. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you next time when we sit down to discuss the library. Oh, that's another criticism. Mm.
No, that was listed. I think.
Was that in the list? That's a shame.
Yeah.
Wee.
Sorry.
Did you know, Chris, that the Great Wall of China is?
That's becoming another one.
Just a long sigh.
Yeah. Which is more in line to how the other people are reacting to any lovemaking.
I'm having a good time.
What was that noise? Right, bye.